All right, I've been thinking about how to do this episode for quite some time, and it's been about a month since I recorded my dry run episode of this, and I haven't really come to a satisfactory answer with regards to how I want to format it or how I want to discuss it and sort of compile it. Maybe have some helpful accompanying images, so on and so forth of this show. But I think that when it comes down to it, my enjoyment of this insane, stupid, fucking anime show is sort of inherently chaotic. So I want to discuss it in a similar sort of to convey the chaotic enjoyment that I get out of it. And with that preface, I would like to begin discussing the 2008 anime of the Japanese light novel for The Library War. And before I begin getting into further detail, I'd like to shout out my good bud Rafflesia, who did a dry run of this episode with me, and she was wonderfully helpful. She gave me a lot of perspective on certain aspects of, for example, the fact that this is a romance show. If you look at the IMDb page that I have up on the right side of the screen, you won't see romance in the genres. It just says anime, action, or animation, action, and comedy. I didn't realize that this was supposed to be a romance show per se, even though there was a romance quote-unquote subplot. She correctly identified that this is, in fact, primarily a romance show, and the action and comedy are the subgenres and not romance. Once she explained that to me, a lot of the tonality of the show made sense. Not much else about the show made sense, but at least the tonality you kind of get. Oh, it's mainly a romance. And I guess if you look at the cover that's showing there, you'd be like, no shit. But I didn't have access to that when I was watching on Crunchyroll, so whatever. There's a lot the fuck going on with this show. Holy shit. Let me start chronologically. I had to do a little bit of digging for this part because they don't really give you the years of when the stuff's supposed to be happening in theory explicitly. You kind of have to suss it out for yourself. The timeline of the show is that in 1989, year of my birth, the bad censorship law that is bad is passed so that Japanese kids can't see titties, I guess. Not just the censored titties that you see in Jav videos, but just no titties, no insubordinate thought, none of that shit. It's a bad censorship law, and it's bad. And then, okay, this is passed by the Japanese Diet, and it has national power over all of Japan, including supremacy over the prefectures, which are sort of like states in the American term. It's like the best analogy, and this becomes important later because it contributes to the show making even less fucking sense than it should normally. After the bad censorship law that's bad is passed in 1989, at some point in 19XX, so before 2000, but after 1989, doesn't really tell you when, the show mentions, and I didn't check the light novel for this because, holy shit, I'm not going to read the light novel for this, but it says that in a newspaper clipping during the early intro moments of the first episode, it says that the Diet then approved, quote-unquote, approved use of force against the people in the department who are enforcing the censorship bad law bill that is bad. And this is like 20 seconds into the first episode. This is where the first immediate huge problem with the show comes into play, because the Japanese Diet is, they're the highest level of authority in the country. So when they passed the censorship law, which establishes the censorship group there, the primary antagonist for the entire series, in 1989, and then instead of just abolishing it, which they have the power to do, I spent about 4 hours being autistic and checking. The Japanese Diet can indeed repeal or pass a new law that overrides an old law with a simple majority. That's just as easy as doing any other law, such as approving the use of force against the censors. So instead of just abolishing the censorship bureau, they quote-unquote approved the use of force against them. So immediately you look at this and you say, well, it's like they just wanted people to kill each other, and like they just wanted to start a war. And as it turns out, that is indeed what happens. And again, it says 19XX, but I'm going to assume this is in like 1990 or 91, a year or two afterwards, because the show starts, the present day in the show, Library War, starts in 2019, and it says that this quote-unquote Library War has been going on for about 30 years. So we got to assume it was like soon after, maybe if not the same year, then soon after that. And also in 19XX, quote-unquote, around the same time, the Library Force Bill is passed to oppose the bad censorship bill, which is bad bill, which, again, going back to how the Japanese federal government works, I spent a lot of time researching this because I thought there's no way it can be this stupid. Maybe there's some kind of provision in the Constitution that makes it impossible to abolish a new cabinet or branch of the government once it's established. You need maybe like a higher 2/3 majority or something. No, they could have just passed a law that abolished the censorship bill immediately, but they did not do that. Instead, quote unquote, around the same time, they passed another bill called the Library Force Bill, which creates a library force. And the protagonist is a member of this library force. That's her job. She protects the libraries. And the job of the library force is to fight against the censorship division. And again, this is not like an alternate universe Japan. This is supposed to be real Japan, even though in 1989, when they passed the censorship bill, you could see like flip phones. The show doesn't really do a very good job of covering its own track. They just kind of... The budget in the show is shit, is what I'm saying. I've got some clips that I could post with this, maybe in the description, to show just how shit the budget was on this show. But this is a light novel adaptation, I guess, so really this shouldn't be a problem with the show itself. I mean, this is a problem with the light novel adaptation, and he or she had plenty of time to write this dog shit, and it was still dog shit. So now you've got a library force versus the censorship force, both of which have been approved by federal bills passed by the Japanese Diet. And this is interesting because that's not how this power battle really shakes out. It turns into a federal versus confederal conflict within the first... Again, this is all within the first 3 minutes of the show. And I'm going into way too much detail, and there's no way that they intended anyone to analyze this much, but they could suck my dick. The libraries and the library force are in collaboration with the local or prefectural governments. The arrangements of, or the details of this arrangement isn't clear. You kind of get some insight into it in certain conflicts, particularly in episode 4, which is somehow called, quote, Rescue the Book General, which I just think is lovely. You got book generals, you have a book arm, the library force. A lot of the terms of the show made me laugh just because of how seriously they took it. Like every time somebody said some moon room gibberish, but I saw the subtitles and it said library force, definitely made me laugh, because the idea of a library force is just the force that enforces a library is the government. I mean, the government does that, but because this whole premise requires you to gin up some insane conflict that doesn't make sense, you had to have the government pass a censorship bureau and a library bureau or force or whatever the fuck. So you end up with this conflict, and because of this weird contrivance, this show ends up making a lot more sense or sorry, a lot less sense than than it should, which is still not a lot. That being said, let me jump into episode 1, past the credits, past the opening credits finally, because that was literally just the preface, or the prologue, or whatever the fuck. You get into the first episode, and the protagonist is... This is interesting as well, because the protagonist is not a dude, it is a lady. And one of my sort of general observations about anime, at least recently in the last, say, 20 years, is that anime that has a female protagonist just sort of generally tends to be less shit. Not because they have a female protagonist per se, but because the male protagonists are so overburdened with the weight of 50, 60 years of stereotypes that they need to live up to, that they end up being usually pretty cookie cutter and boring and predictable. And so female protagonists tend to not be that. And so they tend to be better than the male, not in the show. This lady sucks, dude. I'm going to look at her name real quick on a different page. Her name is Kasahara Iku. She is the protagonist. She's 22. The whole reason that she joined the quote-unquote library force is... Oh, holy shit, this is funny. It says in the Wikipedia that she is initially ranked library clerk first class. That's a real rank, but is later promoted to library clerk supervisor. Hell yes, dude. The reason that she joined the library force is because she was at a bookstore one day and she tried to buy a book, and the bad censorship guys were there, and then a library guy showed up, and then he saved her book, and now she wants to fuck the library guy. This is one of the best parts of this, actually, is that because she was younger and therefore smaller at the time, she's pretty tall, and in the current day, but in the flashback she's quite small, relatively, and so she just assumes that her Chad is going to be taller than she is, but he ends up being a pint-sized prince. He's like 4 inches shorter than her. It's just brutal. She's constantly looking down on him, and she's like, and normally there's like a contrivance so that if the protagonist and his love interest meet each other early on, and they're somehow destined, and they meet each other and it's fate. They see each other before, like they've somehow met each other before in the past. Usually the way they get around them not recognizing each other is that it's like somehow very, very far, and they were very young, which you would think would dissipate sort of the tension and the fate of it, that they were like 3 years old when they promised to marry each other, and they wouldn't care about that, but in anime that doesn't really apply. But in this case, the whole reason, she says that her commanding officer, which is his name is Dojo, which I thought was just the name of a gym, but I guess that's a name too. He is a 5'5" pint-sized prince, and she thinks that he looks like the guy that she remembers from her inciting incident, and he sounds like him, and he acts like him, but she immediately dismisses out of hand in the first episode that it could possibly be him because he's a manlet. And that is what makes this such a subversive and revolutionary show. And then the first episode is when you really get to, I think, what makes this show so bafflingly contradictory and just sort of generally confusing. The first part of the episode is just sort of introducing, the characters, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. But the second half, there's this incident. And this show loves parallels, and not like good ones that are sort of nuanced. Just blatant, obvious parallels between things that happened before and things that are happening now. In this case, if you remember how the pint-sized Chad saved this woman and saved her book, and that's why she joined the library force. Well, this woman sees the exact same thing happening to a little girl, and she decides, damn, I'm gonna do for her what this guy did for me. She fucks up because she's an idiot, and misquotes some fucking insane like library regulation. I don't know, it's terrible. But the point is that pint-sized Chad comes in and saves her again. And here's where I gotta stop, because let me explain in more detail why this incident really confuses me. And it applies to both parts of the parallel. It's both her being saved by Pint-Sized Chad, and then the little girl being saved by her, who was in turn saved by Pint-Sized Chad. Both incidents, which are several years apart. Why the fuck did this happen? Because they both happened in a bookstore. And the thing about bookstores in the show is that why do they exist? Because apparently, if you have, like, there's a censorship, you have a censorship bureau, but I guess there's not a list, because the censorship gangs sort of come in and take whatever books they want to, but if there was a list, then why would it not be public? Why would then they just not sell those books? Or they could sell the books, but they would keep it, secret or behind like a case or something. Why they just steal like thousands? This government agency just takes thousands of dollars. I mean, there's huge stacks of books in this fucking cart, and there's like thousands of dollars worth of books and stupid book anime, whatever it's called, and they just take it. So why the hell are these stores selling this stuff? And okay, you might say, well, maybe they don't know what books are going to be censored, or it's arbitrary. Well, no, why the fuck would they even sell any of it? Why wouldn't they just like move away from a brick and mortar operation and move into, I don't know, like it's like catalog sales? Even if you assume, because the show takes place in 2019, again, it was written in 2008, so you kind of have to tone back the expectations of technology a little bit based on what was happening in 2008. But I mean, still, like they just wouldn't have. They wouldn't order like dozens of copies of these fucking books if they thought there was even a chance of them being censored. I mean, we have real life comparisons to it, and it's absurd. And this is where this show really got me, and this is where it sunk its hooks deep into me, because I asked my good friend Louise. I told him to watch this show because I thought it was one of my favorite shows. He said that he got maybe 2 or 3 episodes in, and it was boring as fuck, and he quit. He wasn't wrong. I mean, this show is boring as fuck, and I think most people would quit. But the world that it constructs is so insane that I felt compelled to continue to see if... I mean, there are 2 options, really. There's one, you can just kind of roll with it, which would create even further contradictions, which would be very funny. Or 2, you could desperately and pathetically flail to correct those contradictions, which would also be very, very funny. And it turns out they kind of go with it's more number 1 than number 2, although you get a little bit of both. At the end of the first episode, of course, the pint-sized prince saves our protagonist, and it's a, the parallel has become, the parallel that she was trying to enact becomes a parallel event to what happened to her in the first place. I'm still really pissed off about bookstores in this show. Like, well, how the fuck do they work? If they can just take any books at random, seemingly arbitrarily, why the fuck would they buy so many copies? This show has made a world... I really want to know what this creator was like thinking, because when it comes to like really stupid anime, a lot of the times they have a concept and they shove it into the cliches. Like, that's why you have all these like high school battle animes, because like they want to do this like battle tournament shit, but they want to appeal to all the useless, stupid, garbage mouth breathers who live in Japan, who are obsessed with stuff that's in high school, and then also like actual Japanese high schoolers too. So they shoehorn like battle stuff into high school stuff. I get that transition, but this is going the other way. Like, this dude started with like, holy shit, we have to have like library people fighting about books, and I don't. And so the entire contrivance of this universe has to fit around that. And for this reason, it goes in the direction of, it sort of rolls with the absurdities, but in rolling with them makes them even more absurd. And I told Raph, I had her actually we didn't watch every episode. I watched every episode many times because I thought they were very funny. But for her contribution, I asked her to just watch a few certain episodes. I'm going to cover those mainly because this is going to run long if I don't cut it otherwise. So that was the first episode that I've discussed, which is just the whole idea of a bookstore. Why are there bookstores in this show? I mean, it's 2019. So, and again, this was written in 2008. The anime was. The light novel was like 2005 or 6. I don't recall off the top of my head. But, the internet's out by then. And so, I'll get to it later. Anyway, so we're going to skip a couple episodes ahead. There's a weird subplot where the main character, who again is a lady, her mom is terrified that she's a lady and might, get shot by the censorship people. And she is the most, crybaby anime, Asian mom of all time. And just as soon as somebody says anything that she didn't know or didn't agree with, she just starts wailing. It's really a lot of fun if you're watching this for the first time. Anyway, I'm going to go on to episode 4, which is unbelievably called, quote-unquote, Rescue the Book General. He's the general of books. Not burning the books because he's on the good guy side. This is one of the most insane things in the show, and Raph, God bless her, agreed with me on this. One of the things about this show that's so bizarre is, even for a show set in 2008, if you've ever watched Archer, for instance, in Archer there's sort of a planned anachronistic style where it's set in the modern day, kind of, but you also have telexes and the Soviet Union still around, and there's a lot of there's fax machines, and there's all outdated tech, but it's planned, it's on purpose. It's sort of it's an inside joke with the viewer that to make a spy sitcom type thing work, there needs to be this. Being the Soviet Union exists, you have a foil, and the foil disappeared from the United States after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed and so on. But they need to keep it alive for the show, and so they keep all this other stuff alive in the show, all this old tech that's kind of stupid, but it's part of the inside joke. In this show, it's a lot dumber and weirder. So there's a bunch of book censorship guys take our main character hostage along with the book general, and I can't fucking believe this is real. They let her talk on the phone so she can give a hidden message, which they act like she didn't say something extremely suspicious, but she did. It was just even if you don't understand the code, she clearly said something that would indicate her location to somebody. I don't know. Anyway, the really insane part is that the book general, she takes his prosthetic leg off because he's in a wheelchair, and his prosthetic leg apparently has a GPS tracking device in it, but only when you take it off. Now, I have several questions about this. First of all, why the fuck does this tracking device not work all the time? It's not like there's a huge power draw of it being on all the time versus it being waiting for a trigger, namely for the leg to be taken off. Second, why not just put a button on it? You just put a button on the backside, or even hell, put a button on the inside of the leg. You take it off while no one's looking, and you press the little button and you reattach it so no one sees that you press the button. But no, the way that this fucking thing works is that you have to take the leg off entirely and then throw it to the ground like a fucking Chekhov's gun, and to wait for for pint-sized Chad to show up and save everybody. And of course, that is what happens. I can't fucking believe the leg thing, because they have no. The show's written in 2008, and at latest, or at earliest, it was the light novel was in 2005. They have scanners, they have fax machines, and this whole subplot is threatening that if you don't, we will kill the book general, if you don't burn all these books, as if they can't just scan them. I worked in the archive for the Space Law Library, and they had the scanning technology back in 2001. And this is Japan. Like, they should have had this years ago. Like, why the fuck would burning these books do anything? I mean, they're not even like they're not like first editions or anything like that. It's literally just burn the books and then they're gone forever. The books are gone forever. There was no possible way to back them up. Like, the disparity in technology here is it's exemplified best in episode 4. But it runs through the whole series. It's like we have a GPS device so complicated that we can like attach a trigger to it that only activates for some reason when he takes the prosthetic leg off. But also we can't scan books. It's just, oh my god, it's really bad, guys. Like this. You just watch the show. Why is any of this Why is any of this happening? Why don't they just scan all the books? They clearly they show like hard drive rooms, like they show rooms like server rooms and rooms filled with hard drives that I feel like are supposed to indicate that they've got books backed up, but they never, like, this never comes up. There's the threat is always that someone's gonna burn all the books, and they just go along with it. Oh, for fuck's sake, I don't know, man. Anyway, it cuts from this. They, in the end, they take the leg off. They track the GPS leg. They break them out, and Pint-Sized Chad acknowledges her as I don't know, like a good library cop. Oh, fuck, I forgot. All right, we need to go back, actually. Before I move on from episode 4, the way that this show starts is unfucking believable. Past the, it started with, explaining the backstory, explicating the censorship law and library force law. The first time we see our protagonist has to be one of the most incredible and funny scenes I've ever seen in anything in my entire life. The first time we see our protagonist, she notices a guy being suspicious with a book, or as it turns out it's a magazine. And he's like sneaking into the bathroom. You would think he's gonna jack off in there, and that would have been the correct decision, but he does not do that. He's just like fat, like weeb-looking piece of shit. She chases him into the bathroom, into the men's bathroom, or maybe his agender, I don't remember, but the dude's in the bathroom, and it's 2019, by the way. That's when this is set. He has a pair of scissors, and he's cutting out a picture of a bikini model. He's cutting out a titty pic, presumably so we can bring it back home and jack off with. Not jacking off in the bathroom. There's like a gajillion stalls. Like there's so many fucking stalls in this bathroom, and she catches him. And now think about that. You are such a coward that in the year 2019, the only option you have to jack off is to, one, go to the library, which is guarded apparently by one of the strongest paramilitary forces in the fucking world. 2, carry the magazine into the bathroom. 3, don't even jack off in the stall. You cut the picture of the titty lady out, and I guess you're gonna put it in your pocket and leave? That's okay. That is your mindset. And okay, one of the stupid ass library cops walks into the bathroom and catches you. What do? What is your response to this? If you are that kind of fucking coward who does that, if your answer was try to use the scissors to stab the library cop to death, you're right. That is what happens. He fucking tries to dual hand the scissors and stab her to death. And of course she beats him up, and then she, I don't know, throws him to the ground. Some dialogue happens between her and the guy whose name is Dojo, who is the Pint-Sized Chad. And then she quote unquote stops paying attention to him, which is bullshit because they're both there at that point, and it's both their responsibility. Then he charges her with the scissors again. Again, this is the guy who was so paranoid about like jacking off the titties that he's in a fucking paramilitary library cutting them out of a magazine with scissors, and he goes again for the kill. And of course, Pint-Sized Chad steps in. He fucking, I don't know, judos him to the ground. He's out. And she tries to thank him, and I swear to God, one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in any anime. He just slaps the bejesus out of her for no fucking reason. Like, ostensibly the reason is because, like, she let him get up and attack again. But, I mean, he just slaps the fuck out of her for no reason. Like, the audio cues are so bad. Like, they're not... There's no indication this is supposed to even, like, not slapstick. There's no, like, funny sounds. It's just, he just fucking... It's like slap, echo, and then just, like, odd silence from her as her face just like contort. It's beautiful, dude. It's one of the funniest scenes I've seen in any. Like he just slaps the shit out of her for pretty much no reason. Like apparently, I guess it's fine. I guess this is how it works in the Library Corps. After this, there's some bullshit filler episode. It's amazing how it feels like, even though this is a light novel adaptation, and you can tell all these were in the light novel because how stupid they were, there's still episodes that feel like they're filler. So you get like another episode with like her parents come in and her mom starts crying because she's not, they don't even find out that she works in the, I don't know, like the SS for books, and she still wails the whole time. There's a really weird scene in, I don't remember if it was it was episode 4. It was episode 4. And it comes up in episode 6 again, but it starts in episode 4 is when you find out how, this is one of the biggest problems of this fucking show, is the rules of engagement. Okay, so this is a paramilitary war going on between two organizations that are kind of affiliated with the government. One of them's affiliated with the federal government, and the other is affiliated with many regional local governments. And if this sounds familiar to anyone, it's because there is something similar happening in the world today. And if you hear me typing, it's because I'm re-googling it. It is the Colombian conflict, aka the modern Colombian Civil War, fought between the Colombian quote-unquote government, which is backed by the United States, and FARC, which is a communist group that was backed by the Soviet Union, and it's not anymore. And if was backed by the Soviet Union gives you an idea, FARC, this civil conflict's been going on for a long fucking time. FARC's been around since 1964, and this has been an absolutely brutal conflict, according to Wikipedia, because I'm not scholarly enough to go for further evidence. This is the closest, again, I gotta remind you, this is the closest comparison to Library War, where there's two massive, well-armed paramilitary groups fighting for supremacy over the whole nation, constantly at war for it says in the prologue that they are constantly at war for the first 30 years, since 1989 all the way to 2019, when the show picks up. And presumably, and this is a little bit of extrapolation on my part, but presumably Japan, both of these sides would have access to the armaments roughly equivalent to what the JSDF has, as opposed to Colombia, which has much less sophisticated armaments, especially FARC. And in the Colombian civil conflict, there were over 150,000 civilians killed over the course of, it was more than 30 years, it was 40 years. Actually, all right, to be precise, it was 56 years and 5 days. Okay, 177,000 civilians killed, total casualties 218,000, 27,000 abductees, missing children 8,000, number of children killed 45,000, number of people displaced between 4.7 and 5.7 million people displaced in the Colombian quote-unquote conflict, the modern Colombian Civil War between the government and FARC. That's the kind of conflict that, in theory, that this show has been presenting to us in its narrative, not in the reality of the aesthetic, or in the presentation, or in the plot, but in the narrative that it tells us through its explication sequences. That's the kind of civil conflict that we're dealing with here. It's something that would displace between a fifth and a fourth of the whole population and kill, if you scale the population up linearly, which I am because I'm lazy, millions of people. That's the kind of conflict we're dealing with here. And in episode 4, when they save the fucking library general, which is his name, the book general, my bad. When they save the book general, here's how they do it. Because there are rules of engagement that, even though the federal government is on the side of the censors, and it's the local governments that have the library side, the federal rules of engagement still apply, and they're pretty favorable to the libraries. I don't know, whatever. The way it works is that you can only fight within library property. That's the only places the library, they have to defend their own property. So what happens in the sort of the fever pitch at the end of episode 4 is that the guys who are in charge of the library force, they just say, we're going to eminent domain everything in this area where the fucking book general is. We're going to eminent domain all of it. We're going to buy it at whatever asking price they say. They apparently have so much money they can pay whatever they ask. And not only that, but there's apparently, like, they could just ask, even if the property owners would apparently know this, they can ask for a cancellation fee, and they can just pay the cancellation fee instead and never buy it. So they can pretend to buy it and then kill somebody from the censorship side and then not buy it, but because they pretended to buy it, apparently it's fine. The rules of engagement make no fucking sense in this show. And that's how they make... Now that I think about it, actually, I didn't discuss this with Raft, but now that I think back, nobody shoots in episode 4 when they rescue the book general. They don't even use their gun. They just break in, like, they don't use their guns from outside the building. The whole strategy was to eminent domain all of the buildings surrounding the hostage building where the book general is, and then but they just break in like a SWAT team. Holy shit, this show sucks. Oh my god, how does it even work? Okay, on to episode 6 now. From that, the whole, I swear to God, there's no scanning tech in this game. I was scanning stuff on my computer in 2005 when this fucking book was written. The whole plot of episode 6 is about, quote unquote, the Book of Prophecy, which is, it's, according to Wikipedia, it's just a reference to Fahrenheit 451. I thought it was 1984, whatever. It's a book that makes the bold, prophecy that there's going to be censorship and it's going to be bad. And they're the main character, Kosar, she's basically calming herself at the thought that this book could somehow predict the future, that there would be censorship someday. As if there's not like 18 trillion books. Before this show before the prologue of this show started, what the fuck universe does this show live in? Okay, so if this Book of Prophecy is based on Fahrenheit 451, what about Fahrenheit 4? Because it exists in our world otherwise until 1989. I don't know. Man, this show's continuities are fucked. Anyway, the reason why I went back to episode 4 to bring up the rules of engagement is because they come up again. And the impetus of this episode comes when they're trying to escort this Book of Prophecy, which apparently they can't fucking scan onto a computer like adults. They're bringing it to the library base. And in transit, of course, they're attacked by the censorship people. And I guess they're not supposed to shoot at them, but they do. They shoot real bullets. They're not supposed to. The rules of engagement say no, but I still don't fucking understand the rules of engagement, because they fire from what could be government property. I don't really know. I mean, they hide at a train station, which, I mean, in Japan, I could be wrong. I could be wrong about this, but I looked it up when I was looking up the diet and I was looking up the separation of powers to figure out if any of this makes sense, and it doesn't. I also looked up whether the trains are privately owned, and in Japan, they're not. The trains are run by their public interests. They're run by the government. So they hide in the train station, saying they can't shoot us here. But it's very clearly stated that the censors are allied with the federal government, not the local governments. So why wouldn't they be able to shoot in the train station? I don't fucking know. It's complete nonsense. But here's the thing: is that they're caught. They get caught eventually at the end of the episode. It's a whole bunch of, like, it's supposed to be tense, but, like, this show has so completely annihilated your sense of stakes and just connection between events and reality in general, that it's hard to feel tense, other than the fact that they're sort of cramped in a small space. I guess claustrophobia is supposed to stand in for actual tension, but it's just so nonsense. And eventually they get to, they find them in the train yard, and then the guy whose name is Jim Dojo, whatever, he gets there too, and one of the this part's actually pretty good. One of the censorship guys just shoots at a kid for no reason. Like, I mean, I know I'm laughing as if shooting a kid for no reason isn't something that we're just seeing, like, literally right now in the United States of America. But, like, he just kind of, the way he does it, just, the way they frame it in the show just makes it particularly insane. Like he wasn't even, he's just in a park, just kind of like Dickie. He wasn't even like violating any kind of curfew or quarantine or any. He's just dicking around. He just like shoots at him, and that gets the gym guy to punch the evil censorship child shooting fuck. And at the end of the episode, they get them out. They get the Book of the Prophecy out. They of course they don't scan it. They don't bother doing that. Why would they? I don't. Oh, that's right. No, it was a flashback. It was a flashback when he punched the guy who shot the kid in a flashback. I don't actually understand why that was a flashback, other than this train yard sequence kind of takes place at night. It would have been a lot more effective if it would have taken place in the same time period. But it was conveyed in a conversation between sort of just like NPC number one and the protagonist. He's like, wow, look how nice this guy you're supposed to fuck is. Because this whole show is, as Raph correctly pointed out, it is a romance show, even though IMDb didn't get that. It says it's just an action comedy. You kind of have to be familiar, I would expect, with just Japanese bullshit to understand that this is is primarily a romance. And she got that. And now that when you look at it in this light, it makes sense, because like this show just, like, she hates him because it's, of course, it's the classic tsundere, but she hates him, so they have to put her in a scenario where some guy can tell her tell Kasahara how unhateable this guy is. And so that's basically what this episode is about. But I'm more upset about the rules of engagement because it still doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, it ends in a standoff where none of them are supposed to be able to shoot, but they're all pointing guns at each other. Going back, like, there's so much that doesn't make sense about this. Like, there's scenes where, and I believe it was episodes 2 and 3, which I'm not discussing in detail because they would make me go insane. They're fighting in a building and they're shooting real, like, munitions at each other. How do the rules of engagement work? Is it within the sort of square acreage property of the library owns? Can you shoot out? What happens if you shoot out of the building and hit somebody who is not on the property? Is that okay? Or do you have to shoot only at people who are within the property of the library force? And then the rules of engagement say you could be fine. Like, there's so much shit. Like, there's people jumping over fences. They're running into the woods in these scenes. Are they still under the rules of engagement? Can they be shot at? We don't really fucking know. The show doesn't even... It's not even that it doesn't bother explaining it. I don't think, like, the writers are actually... This is one of the rare cases where a show that catches my attention isn't, like, condescending to its dog shit, like, base perverted viewers. The people who just wrote it are really stupid, too. The writer of the light novel is stupid. The people who adapted it to an anime is stupid. The show has not one, but 2 full live-action movies somehow. It's not even popular. Nobody gives a fuck about this show but me. It's just me trying to figure out how the fuck the rules of engagement and the separation of powers and the books work. Why are there bookstores? I still don't understand. And so we get past... Episode 6 is the halfway point. The Kasahara is saved by Dojo. They leave the train yard. I actually like the train yard as a setting. Like, I'm going to try to compliment this show. Like, the train yard as a setting is kind of cool. Darkly lit. Like, they clearly wasted all of their animation budget in the first episode. It just looks like complete shit after that. But the train yard sequence, like, at least, like, sort of like the set design, I guess you would call it, even though it's an anime. It's pretty cool. It looks pretty cool. That's the last compliment I'm probably going to pay this show. Episode 7 is another one I didn't have Raph watch, but there's one thing that's important to note in this, because it's basically a filler episode, but one of the guys who is in the library force, and he has access to the main account of the library, and I guess in this world librarians are supposed to be able to post book reviews on the library's website, and this guy reviews the books like it's dog shit, and the protagonist spends the whole episode being mad about it. That's the episode. That's the whole plot, is that she's mad that this guy wrote a bad review on the library website. Libraries don't review things, they just store... Holy shit, okay. Okay. there's just a few episodes left. There's just a few episodes left. Okay, because there's 12 and 13. Those are the two at the very end, and then there's one more in the main body, and it's, I believe it was episode 8. It was either 8 or 10. It might be 10. All right, episode 8 first. Oh no, it couldn't have been episode. If it was, then I'm stupid. But episode 8 is basically there's factions. There's like sub. Okay, they introduced the idea that there are sub factions. There's an administrative faction, and the administration faction is, I guess, opposed to the. It's a lot like the First Order and like whatever the Jedi are in the New Republic. Like they're facsimils of the original thing. So you've got the administrative faction, who are part of the library people, and then there's a library planning committee who are they're the First Order. They're the bad guys. They want to. The plan of the library planning committee is to give all the books to the citizenship guys so they can burn them. The administrative faction, they're the Jedi in episode 7. They're with the New Republic. It's the same shit, different names, except I guess they're not like openly hostile to each other. They try to like recruit. There's a guy in the library force. His brother is evil. Like it really gets dropped on you very suddenly, and this is one of the few places where you can really feel where apparently in light novels, and I'm just saying this out of like pure guesswork based on limited what I've heard, but apparently in light novels, usually you want to adapt. When you adapt to an anime, you want to adapt like 4 episodes per volume roughly. This is a very volume opening like episode because it introduces a new villain out of fucking nowhere, and he's just the older brother of a guy who's already in the library force. He doesn't really like do anything wrong. He just says, "Hey, you want to join me?" And the guy's like, "No." Okay, and then it's over. It's the whole thing, and you can see, I'm following on the Wikipedia to make sure I can remember all my talking points. And the Wikipedia says it best about how consequential this episode is. Despite having more plot explication than any other, it says, in the end, and I quote, "In the end, Dojo comes to see Kasahara despite getting wet in the rain." That's the point. That's the real point of the episode. Again, shout outs to Raph for pointing out to me that this is primarily a romance story. All of this bullshit setup, all of this, you're going to join my probably evil faction, like recruiting bullshit, and because of what our guy Jim Dojo guy does, meeting Casa, they decide to become obsessed with the protagonist because the antagonist has to be obsessed with the protagonist, even though her IQ is at best like 78. Like she is mentally incapable of performing like even the most basic rudimentary verbal tasks. She's got a high performance score, low verbal score. Opposite of me. My performance IQ was 101 and my verbal was 148. Fun fact. And so we get to the end. I'm gonna skip to the end at this point because this is running long. Jim Dojo guy is knocked into a coma. What happens in this infight is this is even dumber than any, because it's not even about a book. There's no book at this point. It's about an art exhibit. There's a library that for no apparent reason is hosting an art exhibit, and now it is specifically defined as a prefectural art exhibition. And when I say prefecture, that's supposed to be ding ding ding. The libraries are allied with the prefectures, federal government, the Diet, they're allied with the censors. So you're supposed to assume that these guys are together. But why the fuck is the library involved in this art exhibition? This is not their mission. It's not within their rules of engagement. It's not within their purview or their jurisdiction or whatever the fuck. And it doesn't even look good. The art looks like shit. It's garbage. Nobody should be looking at this. And so they mobilize. They say literally the entire library corps, but library corps is a real term that's used. They say they mobilize the entire library corps to defend this fucking art exhibit, but like, there's not a lot of people there. It's like a few dozen, and we know that there's branches everywhere. Like it can't be right. It's so insane. And spoiler alert: there's a lady who she works at the library branch where they're hosting the art exhibit. She's a big bitch pussy, and she, for some reason, tries to burn a bunch of books. Again, this whole exhibit is not about books. It's about a piece of art, a dog shit piece of art that looks like garbage. But for some reason, part of the deal for this lady was to burn a bunch of books. There's nowhere else. Like, they're gonna attack, but like none of these people's local forces are being, like, they're still in training. They explicitly say we're not going to use them until they're trained. Like, this whole thing is, why is she a traitor? Why did she burn a bunch of books? Why didn't she burn the art exhibit? I guess it was okay. Well, actually, it wasn't public the whole time, but that brings up a further question. Why was it in storage until the exhibit? Why was it in public to be looked at so she can't burn? I don't know. This show's stupid. The show is insane. Like, the universe that this show creates is so bizarre and so beyond my comprehension. Like, the whole point of dystopian fiction is sort of dread. It creates a sense of dread where you feel inside, like, there's, even if it's just a little part of you, even with something like Cyberpunk 2077, for example, that is so far beyond our current reality that it's in a lot of ways not really recognizable with all the augmentations and such. The whole point is you look at that and you get this feeling of dread in your heart, thinking, like, this kind of thing could kind of happen. Like, what if this kind of dystopian shit happens in our world? And the suspension of I don't even know if you can call it suspension of disbelief. Just sort of the internal consistency of the show. It just destroys from minute one. It makes it so bizarre to watch because you really don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, in Cyberpunk 2077, for instance, I've not read hardly any of the, I don't know, like the trailers or the release spoiler, whatever. But I can give you an idea of what's going to happen. I mean, there's implants. There's going to be some side quest where somebody has an implant they don't want and they want to take it out but they can't, or an implant's making them do something they don't want to do, and it's scary because the machine's telling you what to do. It's bad. This show is so fucked. You cannot follow where it's trying to go because its sense of reality is so distorted. Again, the technology, for instance, I mean, the technology disparity between various fields is so completely out of whack that you have no idea what any of these characters is capable of. And because of that, you really, truly don't know what's going on. And so the Gym Dojo guy for the last couple of episodes, is in a coma, which, God bless, dude, because this is a romance show, and the romance is easily the worst part by far. It is fucking unbearable. This all happens. It happens in episode 11, before 12. 12 and 13 are sort of paired. He gets shot in episode 11 at the very end, trying to save this traitor the traitor librarian. Trying to save the traitor librarian from the burning warehouse where she burnt all the files. He gets shot. He's in a coma, blessedly, for most of the last 2 episodes. Suddenly the media is brought. This is also pretty insane. I didn't realize this on first watch, but it's sort of registering with me now. Is finally, after 11 episodes of insane bullshit, the media it not only exists, which we didn't really know before this, but they become an important plot point because the fact that so many people, like, there was so much fighting and so many people died. I guess apparently the pro-federal government forces control the media, so they're making this narrative that the library people are bad and blah blah blah, whatever. This becomes a really big deal because what the fuck her fate, Kasahara, our main character. The way that this is all resolved is because, of course, she ends up on camera and she's a doofy Naruto type retard, and she says something in the camera that makes everyone at home just, like, they cover their mouth with their hand. They're shocked that somebody could be this brave and yet this hot. And actually, she's not hot. I'll get to that though. And that's kind of how that's not literally how it ends, but that's kind of how it ends. Like, she talks to the media, and that kind of they put pressure on the censorship people, and did they win? And then the library, the book general resigns, and then the show's over. Like, that's it. There's no final fight. I mean, the final fight doesn't strictly have to be violent. It could be in the war of words. It could be in the arena of the public judgment. But it's literally just she talks to a reporter like an ape, and it's so epic. It's so brave that they decide to reopen all the Tesla plants, and all of the backlash against the library people goes away. And this somehow this didn't stop them before. The censorship people were, I mean, there was a huge siege in episodes 2 and 3 where there's like hundreds of people on both sides firing live rounds at each other in a library building. And that was apparently not enough to even tickle a single news helicopter. But this fucking interview with our protagonist, why couldn't... there's a trend in modern anime that protagonists, like, they're skipping the part where they develop. They just get... They spawn in the world, especially isekai. They spawn in the world with infinite bullshit powers. They're one of the top 5 most powerful people on the planet the moment that the show starts. This character not only does not get better over the series, there's no new skills. She doesn't improve at anything other than desperately trying to suck her boss's like 5'8" prince dick. She now that the only like growth points that they try to give her, like with her parents, none of them apply to how they fucking resolve this conflict. She's shown repeatedly to be dog shit at talking to strangers, and I guess maybe it's supposed to be ironic. I don't, dude. This show, if this show is on purpose, it is one of the greatest works of art I've ever seen. It's driving me crazy thinking about it again. Because I first watched the show in like 2016 or 17 or something like that, and it's been a fucking hantavirus in my brain ever since then. And I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about how the fuck... I want to know how bookstores work in this world. Why are there bookstores? How do they work? How do they decide what books to buy? Is there a censorship list? Is it public? Fuck! There's a lot more in the show that I could get into. There's a quantifiably insane side plot with Kasahara's her roommate and best friend. He doesn't want to go on a date with a guy, but then goes on a date with him, and then after like 2.5 episodes, she's like, "Nah, I don't want to go on a date with you anymore." There's no real payoff to this. It's just, oh no, this show is. I'm going to be thinking about this show forever. I thought this was shonen at first. It turns out it's not. It turns out it's romance. But if I had to put it in league with the only 2 other shonen anime that I've watched that I've actually, 1 completed and 2 liked, which are both remasters that shorten the originals. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, the remake in, I believe, 2011 or something like that, and the Hunter x Hunter remake, the more recent one. If I had to compare this to those, quality it's just not even a question, but which one is going to embed itself in my fucking brain folds, the few that I have left after smoothing out the rest, it's this show by far. Because the world that it creates... It is like looking at that fucking MC Escher painting with the stairs. It doesn't even like know that it's insane. It presents itself as something that is within itself. It acknowledges itself as being internally consistent while being one of the most illogical things that I've ever watched in any media, Japanese or otherwise. And I have a couple of notes before I finish. That's basically it. One more time at the end, big shout out to Raffi. She did about 45 minutes of this discussion with me, and it was very helpful, especially the bits about specific tropes and sort of genre identifiers that she picked up on that she relayed to me. And also parallel shout out to the fact that she watched I gave her 4 to 5 episodes to watch. I don't know if she saw 4 or 5 total, but her understanding of the show was just as strong as mine because of how horrendously this anime is plotted out. If anything, she might know, like, understand it better than I do. This show's so bad, man. I don't understand. It didn't. I checked. I did my research. It didn't sell that well in the light novel. It was okay. It was, like, at best okay. The anime did dog shit numbers. There was an OVA that also did dog shit. How did this show get 2 live action adaptations? 2! You got 2. I'm gonna. Oh, fuck. Hang on. I'm gonna. Where's my images? Hang on. No photos. Awesome. Look at this. Look at this shit. Look at this. This is the second one. Their battle for books begins now. That's not even like doing the source material an injustice. It's just Jesus fuck. The person I identify most in this show by far is the guy with the scissors and the magazine in the bathroom trying to cut out the titty model to jack off to. This is the only person in this show that is remotely relatable. He has a desire. He has a motive. He's got means. He has desires. He has an internally consistent set of beliefs, which is jack off or die. And he chose to, when it came down to it, he did choose to die, which kudos to him. Look at this shit. Look at the font. Look at the clouds in the back. This show takes place almost entirely indoors. It's just, look at, this show is really bad, guys. But more importantly, it's really bad in just incredible. And aside from being bad in the standard ways, the animation budget shit. And not only was it shit, animation budget shit shows, a lot of them know that their budget is shit and play around that. This show went for, like, the Hail Mary on, like, 5 or 6 different action scenes, and they look like complete dog shit. There's no, like, convenient cuts. They, like, it's like 10 frames per second for 3 seconds in some of the. It's awful. This show is. Who the fuck made this show? I don't know, like, I don't know who Production IG is. Have they made anything that I like? Maybe, probably. I don't know. There's a lot of shows in here. I'm sure they have at some point. They made the new FLCL. Oh no, they've got to be dog shit. And yeah, that's real grim, dude. These shows. I see Ghost in the Shell, dog shit show. No one likes that. Somebody told me Eden of the East was real bad. I need to watch it, and in fact, I will. I was Raph actually told me that based on the show, I should watch Eden in the East, and because it was Production IG. And you know what? I think that I'm gonna watch that next. But the rest of these shows, Psychopaths for Attack on Titan. Oh, everybody loves Attack on Titan. Oh no, this studio is. I've heard about a couple of these shows that I'm seeing that the animation, at least like the adaptation material is shit, but like some of the animation is good. Like maybe they were different in the 2000s, but holy fuck, this show looks mondo bad, and they don't know that they look bad. It looks like shit. The plot is shit. I've never seen a show. This is an insane thing that I noticed with this show, and I need to get it in before I hang it up. Wait, does that say Halo Legends? Did they make a 2? Wow, that is a 2-season Halo anime. God, these guys suck. Oh no, 7 short films, even worse. The one thing I have to say about Library Wars, before I finish, is I've never seen a show before where every character, including and especially the protagonists, they all look like NPCs. They look like they're CGI background characters in an anime made like 3 years later. They look so bad. The character designs are dog shit. And I guess I'm going to have to pull them up and move them to the screen so you guys can see what these people look like. These are the most NPC, god damn it. These are the most NPC looking motherfuckers. Please tell me this will work. Don't take me to my anime list. I hate it. The protagonist is this bitch right there. It's that bitch. The NPC looking bitch here. You know who the other protagonist is? Honestly, you can't even really tell from this promotional material. You would think it's the one who's closest to her, so you would think it's this guy. This is not the 5'8 Chad. The 5'5 Chad, it's this guy at the very top, because the whole preconception is that she thinks that her Chad is taller than she is, when in fact he was just standing on a higher plane of elevation. I think that's as good a place as any. Stop talking about this goddamn. These are the same guy. This guy and they're the same guy. This show sucks ass, dude. You guys should all watch it. Peace. I'm done.